Okay, good morning. Hi, welcome. I am really excited about today. I can see now that you're coming in. Hello, everyone. Oh, and Lauren, honey, if you're on the line, can you mute your mic for me? I think I've got you. Thank you. Okay, I can see everyone starting to roll in. Welcome, good morning. I'm so excited that you're here. I have got so much to share with you this morning. So as we're just waiting for everyone to roll in and to join us, I want you to just pop into the chat box. Faye's already jumped in and say hello. And maybe just let me know where you're calling in from, where you're joining us from. I've tried to pick a time zone or a time that suits most time zones. And I really want to hear from you why you're here. What would you like to really get out of today's workshop? I've put together what I think is going to be most useful and most valuable for you. But if I can actually see if there's something important to you, I can always try and cover that off too. So, here we go. Hello. So we've got, England. Oh, good. So the time zone wasn't too bad for Leeds, Sydney, California, Seattle. We've Ontario, Washington, California. I've got a lot of Americans on the call. Thank you. I'm thrilled that you have found me from wherever you are. Dal, I'm pretty sure you're not too far away from me at all, maybe a few streets away. New York, New Zealand, another one from Brisbane. Welcome, Amy. Regional Victoria, San Francisco, Melbourne. This is so cool. Burleigh Heads, Byron. Some of my favorite places. Alberta, Townsville. Okay, so wonderful. So as I've said, if you've got something specific that you would love to get out of today, just use this chat box throughout the workshop and let me know. We're going to have plenty of time to ask questions. I've got a couple of little exercises that we'll use too. So I'll come in and out of keeping an eye on the chat box. I want to try and keep nice and focused. That said, my beautiful assistant, Lauren, is on the line. So even if I don't catch your comment, Lauren is here and able to help you out too. With that in mind, just make sure that you choose in that chat box that you're going for all panelists and attendees, and that way everyone can see what you're sharing. Thank you, Lauren. She's just popped in to say she's here to help, and she will. She's fantastic. I'm very lucky to have her here. So, of course, you have all come in here for today's workshop called Trusting the Guidance Within. And we're really going to look at how you can develop trust in your guidance and really know where it's wanting to lead you. So this is the right place for you to be if you are very new to guidance and to intuition, and to all of the subtleties of what's involved when you start to access your guidance or your intuition, maybe your spirit guides. We're going to talk about all of that. But this is also the place for you to be if maybe you've been working with your guidance for some time now and kind of feel like you're getting some mixed results. Perfect. We can work through that too. This is also perfect for you if you've actually had a really good rhythm in working with your guidance for some time, but suddenly things are changing and shifting and you suddenly feel like, this isn't working like what it used to. And there's a real reason for that too. So if these ideas are sounding familiar to you, you're in the right place. What I would say is that this is not necessarily going to be the workshop for you if you've got this figured out. And if you've got it 100% figured out, more power to you. I've been doing this for a decade and I'm still tweaking and refining this work. This workshop and what I'm going to share with you today is probably not for you if you're just wanting a quick fix or being able to reach for guidance so that you don't have to really do the inner work. That's not what I'm about. It's not what my work is about. And I'm not going to really be able to serve you if that's what you're after. But I know that the people that I attract tend to be really willing and able and ready to do the inner work. That's why you're here, isn't it? So with that in mind, I'm going to pop on a couple of slides for you because I want to share with you what it is that we're actually going to be covering today. So what I'm going to do, if I can get my computer to cooperate. Okay, let's share my screen. And so that looks like it's worked. Let's move me out of the way. And let's actually have a look at exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Oh, my slides are right at the end. Okay, so our agenda for today. We want to look at what the guidance is, what guidance is available to you, and indeed how you can access it and work with it. We also want to put together some tips, some practices for how to trust your guidance. It is the main theme of today's workshop and sometimes probably the most challenging. I've also got some information to share about the potential pitfalls of working with your guidance and some of those challenges and questions. I know many of you shot them through to me prior to our workshop today. And of course, you can add them into the chat box and I'll be sure to come back to them when we get to that stage. And I also want to talk about where exactly your guidance is leading you. This is not just about in the moment or in big decisions in your life. Your guidance is actually taking you somewhere I think is far more magical and far more useful. Now, I would really love for you to stay on the call today because I want to share with you some further ways that you can work with me to develop your trust and to have success in living life from your guidance. So I've got some news and some extra bonus materials for you too. So I'll share them with you towards the end of our workshop today. So for the minute, I'm going to just come back in. I'll stop sharing my screen for a minute. It looks like you can see me again. And I just want to really catch you up on why it is that we find ourselves here with me having this particular conversation with you today. And so for the last decade, maybe even a little bit over now, I have worked as a psychic and as a channel. And more recently, I've really come to see myself as a soul guide. That was never my plan. It was never my intention. And life actually started out in a very, very different way for me. Everything changed when I decided to listen to that voice inside of me that was saying, you're not happy in this job. Things aren't working out for you. There must be something more than this. And I'm sure, maybe just let me know in the chat box, I'm sure many of you can relate to this feeling, right? That maybe we follow the right life path. I certainly did. I had a great job in PR. I'd ticked off all of these things by age 25 that was meant to be, the be all and end all. And yet I was pretty miserable. And in truth, I had suffered with depression. And so I knew that something was really off. Now, in my particular story, there's a parallel thread. And as it happens throughout my life, I knew that I could connect with spirit. Now, part of the reason that I had depression, and maybe this is a story for another day, is because I shut it down. And when I was about 20, 21, just before my 21st birthday, I could not deny it anymore. Had a big visitation and everything shifted. And I still tried to shut it down. And if I fast forward many years later, it was at that point where I was like, well, then if I can connect with spirit, then you guys show me the way. And my God, did they show me the way. Now, what I'm going to share with you today does not require you to be psychic, although I think that we all are, but you certainly don't need to have a life path ahead of you to become a psychic. And in fact, of the thousands of readings, psychic readings I've done in the past decade, and the hundreds of women that I have taught this material to, that I've mentored, that have come into my workshops and classes, and if any of you are on the line that can tell me otherwise, I don't think any of them have gone on to create a life for themselves based on being psychic. What they have done is been able to tap into their guidance to figure out what their path is for them. And that's what my hope is. My genuine hope for you is. You were born with some particular path, some particular gift, some particular passion and interest that is needed here on the earth. And things are speeding up here. So the other part that I want to share with you about my background, and you'll understand why this is important in a minute. This is not just a self-indulgent chat about me. In fact, I'd really rather not have to talk about me. But the reason that this is important is that this was my soul path and I had to figure it out on my own. And yes, I had spirit, but it was a real undertaking. There were so many challenges and sometimes still challenges in being who I am and living how I do. However, I hope that in me dedicating my life to this, some of those challenges, the hurdles, the frustrations that I experienced, you don't have to. You don't have to figure this out. I've already, mostly figured it out through trial and error myself, through the thousands of readings, by working with hundreds of women, and ultimately from channeling the guidance from a group of beings, both my own spiritual support team, I'm going to talk to you about yours today, and a more recent group that stepped in, the High Council of Sages. And so things on our planet are speeding up, and we don't really have the luxury anymore of taking our time to figure this out. Things are moving ahead, and now it's kind of like playing catch up. So I can see here, okay, so Faye is a psychic and Reiki practitioner and you need to use it. Wonderful. Your path will end up being completely different to mine. Even if you have some of the same skills and gifts and offerings, your path will be completely different. So your own guidance is what's going to help you become Faye and me to be me. So we can still have similarities, which is wonderful. So many people are jumping in saying, yes, me too. Tracy's just left a career. She yearned for freedom. Okay, so there are quite a few of you. Another Reiki master. Okay, excellent. So no matter where you come from, or what your background is, or what you plan on doing with it, many of the people that I work with, it seems I'm attracting more and more of the healers and light workers. But historically, over the last 10 years, the people that I tend to work with are mothers, creatives, small business owners, employees. This doesn't have to necessarily be that you too have to quit your job. Okay, so Jackie's experiencing it now too. Oh, I've got a feeling I know which Jackie this is. So that's wonderful that you're here. Okay. Oh, maybe not. It might be a different Jackie. In any case, I'm glad you're here. So enough about me. Hopefully I've painted this picture as to why it's important. And each of you will have your own particular path that, you know, not just for you, but for all of us. We need all of us to be on our path. So, Kara's just jumped in. Can I ask how long today's workshop goes for? Totally fine question. I'm hoping to keep it to under an hour. There will be a recording. So of course, if you need to pop off, that's okay. Hopefully you can stick around. So I'm going to share my screen with you again. In doing so, I just won't be able to see the chat box for a little bit. So I'll come back and answer any questions, or as I say, Lauren can type into the chat box for anything else that comes up. So let me come back into sharing my screen with you. Okie doke. And let's pop these slides on. Okie doke. So let's start with a discussion on what is guidance. So in my experience and observations, typically our guidance comes from our intuition, our spiritual support team, from our soul. So what do I really mean by this? Most of us, I think, are somewhat familiar with our intuition. You know, it's that hunch or the gut instinct, a feeling, probably very illogical, maybe a push or a pull that it's time to move in a particular direction. And like I said to you before, mine sort of came in a feeling like, oh, there's got to be something more than this. There are also many layers to our intuition. I'm going to talk about this in a bit of detail as we move on, but it's certainly, as we start to work with it, far more than just a feeling. There are so many different layers to our intuition that I want to share with you today. So we'll come to that shortly. Now, many of you who have followed along with me for some time know that I talk about a spiritual support team. So that can comprise of spirit guides and possibly angels, archangels, ascended masters, and light beings. But even just within the realm of spirit guides, each of us have a number of spirit guides in our spiritual support team. So we have like a leading or overarching spirit guide, but we also have a blueprint guide, we have a healing guide, maybe a teacher guide, and there's certainly some short-term guides that turn up depending on what we're working with or what we're experiencing at any given time. Now, of course, our soul is connected with us, a part of us, and is also guiding things. The best way that I've perceived this, or that I can explain it, is that our intuition, our spiritual support team it's like they're kind of working on behalf of our soul. And as they start to lead us through our own particular healing journey, more and more of our soul's presence, its energy, its frequency can be sustained by us. So we may indeed be able to reach for soul, to meet with soul as in those very early phases, but our connection certainly can deepen and grow in time. Generally speaking. I want to now talk a little bit about how this guidance comes to you. And you can see here on this slide that I tend to think of it as two ways that we can be aware of the guidance coming to us. So the first is in those big life decisions. Remember, I said before, I was working in PR, I was experiencing real dissatisfaction, I had experienced depression. So I was sort of facing this, big life decision of who I was and what work I wanted and even where I wanted to be living. And so sometimes that guidance comes to us like big smacks about the head, which sounds probably more violent than what it needs to, but that's often how I think about it. Sometimes we can have the gentle whispers, of course, that tap, 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 someone just tapping at us gently, gently, gently. For those of you who have children, for some reason that's just come to my mind. My daughter comes in the middle of the night and taps at me, taps at me, taps at me. Or then sometimes she'll just jump on top of me and I know she's there. So when it comes to working with our guidance, of course, we could just wait for those big pivotal moments and try and reach for guidance at that point. my experience and what my own guidance has shown us is that if we can actually move beyond those big life decisions and come into those subtle and gentle whispers in each and every moment, because your intuition and all of the layers of your intuition, your spiritual support team, just life itself is here to support you. It's actually working for you. And so part of my hope today is that if you've only been working with your guidance on those big decisions, that you'll start to move into some of those moment-to-moment guidance too. So I said that I would share with you some of the ways that the subtle ways that we can be receiving that guidance. Now, particularly with our intuition, it's within our four bodies. Now, our four bodies are the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual or energetic bodies. Now, I'd like to put it to you in this way. Anything that's happening in any one of those four bodies can feel good, or it can be positive, or it can feel pretty yucky. Or be what we would call bad or negative. Now, none of it is really bad. It's really, I think it's a litmus test. And if we can tune in every single moment what is happening in each of our four bodies, then we have a whole gamut of information available to us, explaining to us where we are in alignment with our soul and our soul path, or where we need to go for the healing and the transformation. So when we're feeling unwell, physical ailments and diseases, when our thinking is stuck in lack and stories and limitations, or the negative mind chatter, when our emotions have us feeling, what we may commonly refer to as the bad emotions. We may be feeling anger or jealousy or something along those lines. It's so important that we can remain the observer of what is happening and look to it as clues. There is so much guidance available to us right now. So I hadn't actually planned on doing this, but it might just be useful. In fact, I'll come back. I'll stop screen sharing for a minute and just come back into you. I hadn't planned on adding this into the talk, but just take a little intuitive check-in right now. Maybe just close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths, and just do a little feel, a little scan of your body. And just notice what is here. Maybe notice where you're feeling the tension. Just breathe into it. Maybe just observe what your mind chatter is doing. Maybe your mind has some judgments about what you're doing here or what I'm saying. Maybe there's some emotions just underneath the surface. And if you can just drop into that part of you that's observing, the part of you that's witnessing the tension or witnessing the mind chatter, witnessing the emotion, and just settle into that space and ask, why is this here? What is this here to tell me or to show me? What's the learning here in this? And so, as I said, that's just a quick little interjection. I hadn't planned on doing that. I'm not really spending a lot of time here, but I'd be curious to hear. Just let me know in the chat box, just with that quick little check-in, what already is present and coming up for you. I've actually been feeling quite unwell. I was up during the night feeling unwell, and I almost didn't make it in here today. And so I know that something's shifting and changing for me. I don't think it's just about turning up to this call. and my body is actually in need of some rest. So just tune in. It's like, okay, I already know I've got some really wonderful guidance there. As soon as I complete here today, I'm going back to bed. So we've got some excitement, out of alignment, some anxiety. And so it's really important that we stay in the observer whenever the guidance, however the guidance is coming to us, and that we observe it, and that we don't necessarily identify with it. We are not our excitement. We are not the anxiety. I am not my very nauseous feeling. Some more anxiety about life decisions. There's some need to release tensions around your neck and shoulders and throat. So without me even getting too much further into our workshop, there's already so much that you know that is needed in this moment. Kara's got some deja vu, anxious third eye, walking around with a blindfold. That's not so pleasant. An aching foot that has no injury, time to stand on both of them. This is perfect because Diane has gone straight into the condition, the ailment, the clue, and what it means. So yeah, keep working with this. A very simple technique that you can take into your everyday. And of course, it's important that when you understand what it's telling you, that you work with it. So keep chatting. If you observe anything else, I'm going to share my screen again, so I won't be able to see the comments for just a minute, but I will come right on back to them. So let's share my screen and come back into these slides. There we go. So we've also now, so we've seen what's maybe coming up in our four bodies. That was such a quick check-in. The longer that you spend there, the more information that's going to come. I want to talk briefly about the signs and symbols. And again, if you followed me for some time, you know that I love paying attention to the signs and symbols. So even just symbolically looking for the meaning in the four bodies, like you're already starting to work with symbolism. Now, I'm going to ask you to put this in the chat box. I won't necessarily see it for the minute, but I'd love to hear from you. So many of the people, mainly women that I work with, tend to see things like feathers, playing cards, coins, numbers. You only have to do a quick search on Instagram to see the millions of people who see 111 or 1111. Something I've actually been working with recently, although it's certainly been there in other stages of my life, is number plates. So for our international counterparts in Australia, typically our number plates comprise of 3 numerals and 3 letters. So I want to give you an example. Years ago, actually I think it was before we were married, my husband and I were in the process of buying our first home together. Which, as a side note, this is where the psychic and medium work is really handy. Unfortunately for the owner, his father had just passed away. Fortunately for me, I turned up and his father was there in spirit and told me we'd buy the house. He also told me the price that we would get it for. But anyway, that's not the story I want to share. Actually, let's just say that the street address was 29 Star Street. I remember driving one day thinking, oh, I wonder if this is going to go through. I wonder if it's going to go through. And while I was driving, a car cut in front of me with the number plate 295 TAR. Now, when you see it written out, a 5 really looks like an S. And so right in front of me was a very clear sign for 29 Star. And we ended up buying that house. More recently in number plates, I pay attention whenever I see the letters TLS. Well, it's not my business name anymore. The Little Sage is still the name of my company. And so anytime I see a number plate with numbers and TLS, I know that there's a sign there for me and a message when I interpret the numbers. So The signs and symbols we receive, not everything is a sign, but certainly being open to it, the things that kind of hit you like that smack about the head or make you sit up and pay attention. And really, it's a process of interpreting them. A really great place to start is Google. But actually, as you start to build your own repertoire, you're going to be able to ask for what these symbols mean for you. Now, I also briefly want to touch on what I call the 6 C's. These are really the non-physical senses, or the clairs. So what I mean by that is clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairgustience, clairsentience, claircognience, and clairalience. And basically these are, so clairvoyance, most of us have heard of, clear seeing, clear hearing, clear taste, clear smell, clear feeling, and clear knowing. And it's certainly something that we can develop, that we will start to see all of the non-physical communication in any given moment. And chances are your spiritual support team in particular are going to use these means. So when you are working with your guidance, I think of it as two-way communication. And I want to be really clear here. You are building a relationship with your intuition, with your spiritual support team, and with your soul, and any other guiding being that happens to work with you. And I often say to people, you know, you wouldn't leave your front door and walk out onto the street and stop the first person you see and ask them for life advice. And even if you did that, you're probably not likely to take it very seriously. This is how I think about guidance. You have to build a relationship with your guidance so that you get to know them, you develop trust, which we'll continue to talk about, and that you also understand where they're coming from, what their perspective is, and indeed whether or not you want to take their advice, because ultimately you have free will. So if we have two-way communication, we can have incoming calls, but we can also make an outbound call. We can ask for guidance. Now, some of the ways that we're constantly receiving calls in our dreams, visitations, certainly in our intuition, in those 4 bodies that we spoke about before, with the signs and the symbols that we're receiving. And I can't wait to be able to see the chat box again so I can see some of the ways that you're already receiving the incoming calls. And we're actually always able to tap into those 6 C's or our non-physical senses too. So our clairvoyance or clairaudience. When we start to actively work on these skills and on these tools, it becomes a lot easier to make an outgoing call, to actively seek guidance. And as I've just said, an important part of this is asking. You know, if you want to call a girlfriend and have a chat, you actually need to pick up the phone and find her number, and maybe not even dial it anymore, but at least hit call. And so it is with guidance. It doesn't have to be the big smack about the head. You can ask. Actually, in asking, you start to open up the floodgates. Particularly our spiritual support team, you know, they're not here to interfere with our path, but once we have said, yes, I'm happy for you to work with me, then the floodgates open. So some of the other outgoing calls that we can make, maybe working with oracle cards, for me, automatic writing, guided meditation with specific experience in mind, and certainly some of the scrying techniques. So something that I have used in the past is working with pendulums, but there's certainly a range of ways that you can be working with making these outgoing calls. It's really important here that you are asking for the highest good of all involved. The questions that you're asking when you're making these calls need to be for your growth and for your particular pathway. You can't simply choose to open up to guidance just to figure out another way for the ego to get what it wants. we're going to talk a bit more about that in just a few moments. So, I think I've lost okay, I'll come back into there was another slide here that I just wanted to talk about. So before we go into that, hello again. Okay, so actually, oh great, some of you have shared some of the ways that you are already receiving some guidance. So Apple has said Green Dot was their company, and that they would see heaps of things that show this, even though you don't have that business anymore. Katie's confused with what the 6 C's mean. So we're receiving information through our non-physical senses. So we've got the sense right now, your physical eyes are seeing me. Clairvoyance is the non-physical sight. So your third eye, seeing in vision and in dreams and clairvoyant images. You actually also have the ability to hear. So when I'm channeling, when I'm more so when I was doing medium work, I would hear voices. And you can imagine when you start out that may be a little concerning. Some of us have had the experience of smelling. So again, particularly with medium work, when I would read for a client, if they were a smoker, I would smell smoke. My client and I weren't smoking. My neighbors weren't smoking, but smoke was suddenly filling my room. So that's what I mean about the 6 C's. It's about actually opening your awareness up to the non-physical way in which we're receiving and processing information. So your intuition or clairsentience, the feelings that you get, is most likely where most people start. So I hope that answers your question. Maria and her son are seeing signs every day. The same car when you go out. Oh, these are moving fast. I can't read them all. So Jackie says that she, through lighting, asking questions and asking them to flick the lights off and on to answer, and it's awesome. Yeah, my grandmother does that, and it really pees me off. I've had to ask her to stop. But yes, spirit can do that too. Sometimes spirit can come in physical sensations. And when I'm teaching in my programs, and we've got a lot more time to go into all of the specifics, I often ask for spirit to give us a physical sensation. So right now my hands are tingling. Very much so in the beginning, I would ask if spirit was there to make my hands tingle. And you might find something similar too. A lot of those tuning into your physical body may actually be, it might just be spirit trying to get your attention too. So there's some wonderful things here. I'm glad that answered your question, Katie. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I can see there's lots of other questions. What I might actually get you to do for specific questions about the content, there's another box that you should see at the bottom, the Q&A box. Either if you've got a question, can you pop it in the Q&A box? Or Lauren, if you see any there that you can pop in for me. I'm going to come back and answer all the questions at the end because there's still plenty that I want to get through, and I'm aware of time for us today. But what I wanted to come in and talk about, my slide was missing. I don't know what I've done with it. I wanted just to talk about creating the perfect conditions for this. So as you can see, if we're wanting to tune into our body, if we're wanting to actually realize that we have these non-physical senses, and that, you know, we just took a deep breath and felt that there's so much information available to us that it may actually be difficult to hear it when we're rushing, when we're busy, when we're working, when the kids are screaming, when we're with our clients or with our boss. When life is happening, it's hard. And so it's actually very important in developing your own relationship with your intuition, your guides, your spiritual support team, your soul, that you actually create some time for this. You know, if you were starting to date someone, you'd put some time aside to actually go and see them, right? And you'd turn up and you'd go on a date. So it is with this. Now, some of the ways that I suggest that we do this is by creating stillness, silence, and space. So that may mean different things for different people, and it may also depend on your life phase or what kind of life you live and what commitments you have. But it's really important that regardless of what is in your life, that you carve out time for silence, stillness, and space. That might look like meditation. That might look like a formal practice of meditation. It might look like making your 5-minute shower every morning your meditation. It might look like self-reflection practices. It might look like journaling. It might look like yoga. It might look like going for a walk or running or painting. But some activity that is, I guess, meditative in its form, in that it's allowing the mind chatter to still, that there's a heart opening and a space, and that there's just something here beneath the surface that you open to. If nothing else, it's just good for your health. But because I am who I am and do what I do, I think that not only will it improve your health and your mental capacity and actually give your body rest, it's actually going to create space for you to have that communication. Because you're building a relationship with something that's not physical, it becomes quite difficult. You know, the people and the activities that are here in this 3D reality with us tend to take precedence. So it just needs a bit of conscious effort, I suppose, to task our way or task ourselves in that way. So you can really create that practice however you wish. The other thing that starts to happen is that we develop our own rhythm and ritual. Each of us has our own natural rhythm. And in fact, if we speak generally, women's rhythm is very different from a man's rhythm. And it's a whole other conversation around our menstrual cycles. But also, you know, if we just speak really broadly about the seasons of our life and our life cycles, there's the macro rhythms and the macro seasons, but there's also all of these micro seasons. And so as we're really starting to tune in to our own rhythms, and that's easier when you've created stillness and space and the silence to actually observe that. And I will help you to build that. Certainly if you come into some of the programs and into some of my work, we really dive into what is your rhythm. When you're starting to work with your guidance, they're getting you into your rhythm. And so it's also sometimes why you may feel like it's really hard to hear them. They're just waiting for you to like slow down and to find the space. And it's actually creating a new rhythm for you. So just something to bear in mind, that it will be a really part of the process for you. Okay, I think I'll go back into my slides. I'm going to come back to all of your questions towards the end. So let's share this again and let you see that. Oh, you probably can see my daughter. I've got her on my screensaver. So hi, Isla. Very old photo of her. Okay, so let's come into trusting your guidance. As I've said all along, this is about developing a relationship. So treat it as you would any other relationship. Create the space, create the time. And I encourage you to start small. Like I said to you before, you know, if you were just to turn to your guidance on those big life decisions, it's full of risk, and it becomes easier if you can actually develop a trust, a banter, this trial and error, and figure out what are the signs and symbols of your guidance. What does it mean when you've got the tension in your neck? What does it mean when your foot is hurting? What does it mean in my case today when I'm feeling nauseous? And that you start small and work your way up. So rather than having your starting out point in your relationship, like imagine if you were dating and you turned up and went, okay, I'm ready to get married, and it's your first date. You know, that might not fly. But if you turned up and it was like, okay, well, this is who I am, this is what I'm looking for, this is what makes me tick, this is what I'm interested in, you're going to get a far better sense of what it's like to hang out with this person And so it is with your guidance. And so some of the things that you might want to start working on is not just how they communicate to you. It's not just looking for the incoming calls or what their signs and symbols are. It's also about asking in the beginning some low risk questions. So rather than, should I leave this relationship or should I change my job? It might come down to, is this the right food for me to be eating? Is this the right appointment for me to be keeping? Something that's actually relatively low risk. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of journaling and recording this. At last count, and it has been some time since I counted, I had well over 150 journals. And I've dated everything. I've written down my own feelings. I've written down the questions that I've asked. And because I'm also a channel, that my guidance comes through in automatic writing. But certainly in the beginning, I would just record maybe some of the clairvoyant images I was getting, or the clairaudience, the phrasing, and just write down whatever it was. By recording this, particularly for those of you who may be like me and wanting proof, it's really hard to trust something that you can't prove. And I get it. Part of this is actually being in the unknown. But at the outset, and just to help you build that rhythm, is that if you can actually start to see that last week you wrote down X was going to happen, or that X needed to happen, and you fast forward a week or 2 weeks and that very thing happens, you're going to develop trust pretty quickly. And I've also hinted on that there's some elements here of trial and error. And so it's really just a matter of tuning in. And as you're writing it down, you will refine this. Now, what I've also learned through that trial and error is sometimes I would have a hunch, a feeling, an idea, some guidance that had come in, and it didn't work out the way that I had thought it would. And I want to be really clear here, the guidance isn't wrong, but our interpretation of it could be. Our understanding of the timing could be wrong. And so I want to make that point, that our guides don't get this wrong. But there may be some tweaking on our end to understand it. Okay, so I've got another little exercise for you. I'll come back in and stop sharing my screen. So Katie has said, so cute. I'm guessing that that's because I forgot that Isla is on my screensaver. She's about 2 years younger in that photo. Anyway, let's do this little exercise. So I want you to close your eyes again for me. And just as you're starting to settle in here, many of you have shared some of this already, but I just want you to bring into your awareness a particular question or life event, something that's actually top of mind for you in your life right now. And just let it come into your awareness. And when you know what you want to inquire about, I then want you to just observe how your mind handles this. Notice the thoughts about it. Notice the feelings. And just observe. And then I want you to take a deep breath. Let that go. Let the mind go. And just hold that same feeling again. Or the awareness again. And this time I want you to think about one particular course of action that you could take. And just really hone in on that particular outcome, that particular pathway, the potential possibility. And as you're feeling into that, notice what happens in your body. Does it become tight? Does it become nauseous? Does it become closed or anxious? Or actually, does it feel really positive and excited and open? Does it feel expansive? Is there a sense of relief? So just observe what happens. And I want you to take another deep breath. Just let that go. And this time I want you to consider a different course of action to that particular problem or situation in your life. Some other way that you could handle it. And again, just place all of your awareness, all of your attention on this potential pathway or potential outcome. And again, just notice what happens in your body. And just observe how you feel. And then I want you to inquire which potential pathway, which potential choice brings the better feeling. Maybe neither of them do, and then that's your answer itself. But just observe how your body is responding, how your thoughts are responding, how your emotions are responding. You might already get some of your spiritual support team dropping in. They tend to turn up when I'm working in this space. So Jackie has said that she's feeling great or light on option 1, I'm guessing. Then you've got a bit of heaviness for option 2. So that's already some really useful guidance that's very subtle and just something that you can also develop and play with as you're starting to tune into your own intuition. Okay. Sometimes it's really hard to discern. Sometimes it's really hard to know. And, you know, we are just scraping the surface of this today. Like I've said, I've spent a decade really going into the nuts and bolts of this. You know, oftentimes we aren't necessarily sure whether what we're doing or the guidance that we're receiving is maybe our fear or not. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But I can see that a few of you are chiming in here. So Nikki has said that there was relief on both options, but the second also brought calm and peace. So that's really insightful too, right? That, both outcomes are good. I'm going to feel even better going in this particular direction. Diana said that she went straight into her solar plexus straight away. So, you know, I haven't even touched on the chakras today. They're certainly part of that energetic body. But they will certainly be a litmus test of what is going on, and more so the litmus test in the healing that we need to receive. And that's actually a different conversation, which I am going to touch on in just a minute. So it's great. There's lots of sensations in the body. Faye had some release in knowing how to deal with what she had, a lump in her throat. Diane had neutral and then very restricting. So that's great. And then you can actually start to use some of these other tools to round out the guidance on that particular issue. So I'm really mindful of time. Let me jump in. I've got a couple more points that I want to make, and then we'll come into your questions. So let me go back to my slides. So sharing. Hi, Isla. Rose is in that photo. She's just hidden. Okay, so we've spoken about that. I want to take a couple of minutes here to talk about the pitfalls of working with your guidance. So as you can see, it's really going to ask of a commitment. We're developing a relationship, and that, you know, like I've said, it's a two-way street, and that at some point we have to take the leap and we have to commit to this particular relationship. Not only that, but we will be asked by the very nature of working with our guidance to take the leap into the types of actions it's asking us to take. And I just sort of hinted before that in the very beginning, the types of action are really about slowing down, developing rhythm, and there will be some sort of general theme in the beginning. Maybe it will be to rest. Maybe it will be to meditate. Maybe it will be to practice with oracle cards, or in my case, I just had to meditate, and also automatic writing. But there will certainly be some inner work that we're guided to do. There will also come a time where we have to make decisions in our outer life too. So the guidance can certainly be inward focused, and it generally stays there until such point that we are ready and poised to take the leap in our outer world. So also why I say to you to start small. You will know, your guidance will let you know when it's time to take the leap on those bigger items like changing jobs or relationships, maybe, moving house or moving city, something like that. One of the other pitfalls in working with our guidance, and I did hint to this very early on in our chat today, that we need to remain non-attached to the outcome. We have to be so careful that our ego isn't interfering in the process. And when I'm teaching within the workshops and within my programs, and we go into a lot more depth of the strategies with this, I share, we have to ask for the guidance, and we still need to move through a series of steps. So the interpretation of it, the understanding of it, there's quite a few steps before we come to acting. And we need to be mindful that ego isn't getting in the way, and simply reaching for a higher source and then moving from the human self to get there. What I mean by that is, and I have fallen into this trap many a time before, it takes a real commitment, I think, that I can receive some guidance, a vision of my future. My human self says, great, thanks very much. I'm now going to go and make a plan to make that happen. And, even as I'm saying that, I've got the clairvoyant image of a group of spirit guides just sort of shaking their head at me like, okay, if that's what you want to do, but we'll meet you back here next week when it doesn't work. What I also mean by non-attachment to the outcome is that it's not a means to an end, and it's not necessarily about it looking the way that you want it to look. Really, this is about the blueprint and your journey rather than the outcome. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in just a second. And I've also said to you that this isn't really just a one-time only gig. This is really about opening up to a brand new life. And as I said to you at the beginning, we've done things a certain way that, at least in my case, had left me feeling very down, at times depressed, very dissatisfied, disconnected, disenchanted with my life. And when I really committed to it, when I was willing to say, okay, I'll hand this over and I'm willing to get to know you, a whole new life awaited. And just as well, the camera is off me at the minute because it actually makes me emotional. The day that I quit my job in PR, my husband, my now husband, he was a colleague at the time, was sitting 2 desks away. It took me quitting for him to send me an email and say, great, let's go and have a drink. I would never have got him or my children or this work or the travel or just the chance to be me if I just didn't take that risk in this relationship. It's so worth it. Okay, we're almost at the end. One of the biggest pitfalls that we come across is avoidance and resistance. Now, remember, I said to you earlier that when we feel those kind of yucky sensations, which to me, avoidance and resistance are like the ultimate. Fear can come into this as well, because often we don't know whether it's fear guiding us or some other bigger guidance. I generally say that if we're wanting to avoid, we're resisting, we're stuck, we are out of alignment and we're not actually receiving the higher guidance about our pathway. But the avoidance, the resistance, the fear is actually a gateway itself. And so one of the biggest pitfalls I see is that people get confused when they feel that challenge, the pushback, the about something, and automatically think it means don't do it. It really just means that there's something inside of you that needs attention before you make the choice. So please just bear that in mind. I've also added onto this slide the idea of like, what do you really have to lose? The ego thinks it has a lot to lose. And even if you lost those things, what would that really mean? And really what I have seen it boils down to is that ultimately ego doesn't want to lose control. Perhaps a better question here is, what might you have to gain? And as you've already started to tap into your own body and your own feelings, you may be able to tap into calm and peace and joy and happiness. And what that might start to look like in your outer world, definitely in my case, and actually some version of this for all of the people that I have ended up working with, is a new city or a new home. In my case, multiple homes. It may be that you do start the business or build it in the way that you need to. It may be that you come across your children. It will be relevant to your path, but you're only going to know it if you actually put the awareness on your path to begin with. And so this is really that culmination piece. Accessing your guidance and developing trust and a relationship with your guidance is really just the first step. I said to you before that your guidance is always going to be taking you inward first, and it wants to clear out for want of a better word, the blockages, the misalignment. So it's going to take you through a process to clear out and to heal what is not in alignment with who you really are. And so there is a healing journey that commences. But there is also a very big connection to your unique soul blueprint. And so part of what I've been channeling over the last few years is that this framework and that guidance is really just this entry level into our soul path and the soul journey, and that there are actually multiple phases in that soul journey. And so before we can really understand what's happening at those later phases and stages, we need to have this groundwork in place. And so your guidance is going to lead you in to your unique path, your unique healing. And that might not necessarily be through a healing modality or only working with one particular healer or practice. You will start to develop your own toolkit to all of the healing that is needed in relation to your particular journey. And you've already got those answers. As I said to you before, you don't need to go this alone. And in fact, you know, as the High Council of Sages, if you've been following my energy forecasts, either in the newsletter or in our free Facebook group, you will know that we are moving through this collective awakening fast, and that there's a quickening, that ultimately the High Council of Sages have me doing this work because I believe, they certainly believe, that we need to be getting these foundations right and often running in our path. And so with that in mind, it is to let you know that guided living is here. This is my program and the teachings that I've actually been working with for many, many years. I haven't run this program, well, certainly not under this name before, but I haven't run it for a number of years while I've been channeling something else. And so it's back, it's updated. And if you want to, you can see there the URL. Maybe Lauren in the chat box will add it in so you can just click through. I might just stop sharing my screen again and come back to you because I want to let you know about this program. In this program, we really go in deep. I give you over 8 weeks. So there's 4 modules. You've got 2 weeks for each module, self-paced, to move through this. All of the exercises, how to do automatic writing, how to work with your oracle cards, how to use pendulums, how to interpret your dreams. It's also how to build out your reference library. And that's just really one of the modules. We also go into what the framework is, what the connection is with your soul blueprint, how to understand it and understand what your particular journey and what your particular rhythm with that journey is starting to move like. I'm also sharing in Guided Living the onward journey. You'll start to get a sense of how you can actually map not just your healing journey, but the onward journey for how to bring what is inside of you out into the world. So it's here and it's available. The sales cart is open. What I am doing, and Lauren will attest to this, I only just messaged her yesterday and went, I'm adding something else. It's going to be live. So for the first round, and I don't intend, yeah, Lauren's just chimed in to say she can confirm that. I hadn't intended on doing this live, but for those of you who sign up now, you will get access to 4 group coaching calls with me. So as you're moving through the materials that are delivered to your inbox each week, you then get to come onto a group call with me to ask your questions. And so I don't intend on doing that ongoing. It's just if you sign up to Guided Living now. So not only am I going to, that's a new bonus, but I just decided, well, in truth, Spirit said, you need to add this in. So here I am and adding it in. But I've also taken $50 off the price. I will also send you a deck of the Little Sage Oracle cards that currently aren't available for purchase. And there's no steak knives, but I will throw in the shipping on the cards as well. But it's time to sign up now. Those bonuses aren't going to stay around. So I do hope that if what you've heard today has resonated, you want to come in deeper, you want to actually be able to connect with me and learn from me more. Guided Living, I put all of myself behind it. Apple, yes, we can send you the link. Actually, Lauren, if you just want to drop the link back into the chat box for me, Apple's just asking for it again. Thank you. So all of the details are on that page. A couple of things that I want to share with you. The teachings that are in there are exactly what I did when I left my job in PR and was like, oh, I can connect to something and I know I can do readings, but how do I do this for myself? This is it, step by step. I had previously taught this as intuitive living. So some of you may have seen that in the past. It is updated with these new frameworks and the new connectivity with our blueprint and our healing journey. So it is updated content. But it's already been proven with so many women, actually, and a couple of men already. And these women, one has left Australia and has packed up her family and has ended up, over time, she's now living in Amsterdam. One actually ended a very long-term marriage. She has grown-up children. She wrote a book. she's living a very, very different life. In fact, a few of the people I've worked with over time have written books. Some have gone on to become mothers and are mothering in a different way. This will really set the foundations, not just for how to access your guidance, but what on earth you do with it once you've done it. So I truly hope that you may wish to join me there. That really concludes the teaching component of today's call. But I said that I'd come back and answer questions. So I can see that there's a few questions that have been left for me. I'll start with those. And of course, if you've got specific questions about the program or what's available, please pose them to me now. If, of course, you don't have any questions, thank you for being here, and no sweat if you want to jump off the call now. So thank you so much. So I'll come into these questions. So Apple has asked that when you're thinking about a certain thing and then you start to see that thing all the time, isn't that just because you're focusing on it and not to do with spirit? When do you know the difference? Great question. They are two separate things. We have the ability to create and to manifest. And so my advice, and I explain all of this in Guided Living, is don't ask for the sign. Ask for a sign. And then if you then see something over and over and over again, you can't go looking for it because then, yeah, I'm kind of skeptical of that too. So this isn't just about, and it would kind of be that explanation of the ego wanting to self-fulfill what it wants to hear. It's actually one of those very gray areas and one of the pitfalls. So that's a great question to ask. Dale has asked, how do I feel about crystals? I actually used to sell crystals. I work with crystals. My personal relationship with crystals has changed a lot. I've got a lot of mixed feelings about crystals. Generally, the crystal, as long as it has been sourced ethically and it's not actually manufactured, which sadly a lot of the crystals are. We think that we're getting these beautiful gemstones and they're actually not so authentic or have been manipulated. That doesn't sit well with me. But generally speaking, connecting with the energy of crystals is a beautiful practice, as long as the crystal that you're working with has that energy to begin with. Crystals can actually really support your journey, and they certainly supported my journey early on. Phage Hanning says, how do you know when you're being guided by someone or you are guiding them? Oh, really cool question. I think what you're really asking about is guiding in like a physical sense, because you're saying, or you are guiding them. So I don't think that we would have any guidance over our spirit guides. We have no influence over them whatsoever. So I don't think we can guide them, which would imply, maybe if you're still on the line, Faye, you can clarify. But we need to be careful about our role in guiding others. And I certainly, just because you can receive information or you can receive guidance, guiding people. Thanks, Faye. There's a whole other system and process in place that we need to be so careful that our ego, our human self, is not interpreting, over-analyzing, projecting when we share that guidance. And so it's kind of a separate conversation that if you're working in that space, that there would be other systems and processes in place. It's certainly not something that I'm teaching. I don't, like I said at the outset, I'm not necessarily in a space of educating other healers in that space. But we really need to make sure that we're in in our power, in our own energy, that our energy channels are clear, which is also why I personally come in and out of doing readings. If I've got other stuff going on, I know I can't give my fullest. It's not our role to guide other people, or let me rephrase that, because I do see myself as a guide, but from light and allowing them to see what they choose to see rather than seeing it the way I see it. Hopefully that makes sense. Katie has said that she has a question, bouts of anxiety and depression, and still do. And there's sometimes these deep feelings are so deeply intense, I get confused between what is my depression or what is my instinct and guiding force. I've wondered what your advice was on how we can differentiate between these two very contrasting but very deep emotional pulls. First and foremost, Katie, and this is something that I talk about in the program, because we have physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, what comes up in our physical body can be treated from the inside out, but it's also important to understand that it can be treated from the outside in. So it is important that at a physical level, if you are experiencing anxiety and depression, that you seek the physical and mental, possibly even emotional help that you need. That needs to be processed first. So perhaps I didn't share this necessarily at the beginning. I sought treatment for my depression, and as that was being treated, I could work on the other things. I did not make any life decisions while I was being treated. So if you are at that level, it is so important to get the support that you need. Once that treatment is in place, then, and it's very loving and very nurturing to support yourself in that way, then you're going to be able to better recognize the difference. So I just want to be really clear. I'm not sure if this is true for you specifically, Katie, or just anyone else that's on the line. So assuming that that is taken care of and is being treated, if it's a diagnosed condition, sometimes we can feel anxiety around particular choices, particular situations. I do believe that what happens in the physical level is symptomatic of something that is happening underneath. Generally speaking, and I want to be clear that this is not personal, certainly not medical advice for you in particular, or anyone for that matter. This is generally speaking that anxiety can be symbolic of the control, of fear, and that there's something here underneath it that needs to be addressed. There will be a healing of where the fear comes from, or where the need for control, the lack of safety, the lack of security comes from. And that's what it's showing us to deal with. With depression, certainly in my case, it was that I was so far off my soul path that my spirit was sad. I kept banging my head against a brick wall that wasn't for me. So I hope that helps. And that to be able to work through that at a physical level, if it's very debilitating, is important. Okay, Amy, with color, I've switched from reds, greens, and purples, and now seem to be all about blues, purples, and reds. Colors are very symbolic. I always tend to link them back to the chakras. There's a whole world of information available on colors. Many of the angels, or archangels in particular, many of the ascended masters work with different colors and different rays of light. So Amy, I would send you down that path to research and to take a look into. So I think I've answered all the questions that have come into me there. Oh boy, someone's just logged in. We started an hour ago, so you've actually missed most of it, but you will get the replay, Kim. Head and heart will tell you two different things. Absolutely. We cover that in great detail in one of the modules in Guided Living. And actually the technique that we used throughout the chat today will actually help highlight to you. At one point we asked our head, then we came into our heart and started looking at different avenues. So who asked that question? I can't see your name there. Sheila, I think, asked that question. Just go back to that technique. It's a great starting point, and then you can build up from there. Cara has said that she's done intuitive living and the Soul's Guide in the past, but you need to revisit some of the content from Soul's Guide, and that you want to plug back in. It's been a good reminder today. That's wonderful. Might this step-by-step process be helpful for me in a new way? Cara, if you've done intuitive living before, many of the exercises are still the same. I haven't changed many of the exercises. Some of the explanation and connectivity and the way in which we move through the exercises has changed. And I have there might be a couple of new meditations. I can't remember. Maybe there's different meditations, but knowing you, Cara, and I have worked with you in these higher programs, it would be useful and to actually do it in context of the more advanced work that you've done would be useful. And if I put it to you in this way, it's not by chance that I have had to come back to programs and, for those of you who followed from the Little Sage, many of the things that I had at the Little Sage have to come back in. My personal journey, even though I've gone all the way out into the ether and I'm channeling from soul and channeling the High Council of Sages, and at a human level, I have to come back and remember this too. So look, I think that there would be value in it. Cara, if you've got more specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. Just email through to the hello@helenjacobs.co email address. I'm really happy to talk to you some more about it. But a lot of the exercises are the same, but our processing with them is different. Tanisha, will the course cover any meditations on the chakras and strengthening the root chakra? We just touch on the chakras. You will get a chakra balancing meditation. And we do talk about the chakras. I talk about them very generally. It's actually another of my programs where we go into the chakras and we do the processing and we do the really deep dive into the chakras. So actually just having the meditation is a really great way to prepare you for the onward programs when they come. But we're not necessarily going into each of the chakras. You can use the meditation to do that if you know that's what you need to do. And of course, if you're signing up, you'll have the group coaching calls with me. So you can absolutely be picking my brain in those calls too. Karen, oh, I wonder which Karen this is. You've said about reintroducing. I wonder if this is a Karen that I know has been around for years. If it is, super excited you're here. If it's a different Karen, I'm also excited that you're here. And you feel that you need it. You've done it before and it was so good for me. I'm so glad. And I think, for Karen, Cara, you're on the line, you've done it before. The fact that you're saying that this program is great and useful and that, you'd actually be willing to do it again, I think is testament to the work that's in it. But if you do choose, Karen, to come back into it, I'd be so excited to see you in there. Thank you, Cara. I hope I'm feeling better soon too. Amy's, any suggestions, anyone, on color and chakra? So in the Guided Living course, I do give you an outline of what the chakras are, what their colors are, what to look out for. Honestly, Amy, if it's just an interpretation of color, Google it. If that's what you want, just Google it. You can Google the colors of the chakras. But if you really want to come into what's behind that meaning, certainly something like the course would be useful. Oh, it is you, Karen. Wonderful. Yes, the chakra meditation, it's in there. In fact, if you're familiar with my meditations, the chakra meditation's in there. Grounding, clearing, and protecting your energy is in there. The new moon and the full moon meditations are in there. Self-love, intuitive action plan. discover your life purpose, meet your spirit guide, meet your highest self. Like, there's a lot. I don't know that all of them are in there, but you're getting the suite of meditations. So they're all in there. Okay, Katie, I'm glad you're excited. I would love for you to join me. Thank you, Ash. I actually feel so much better for having just come on and showing up and doing the work I'm here to do. So I think that I've answered everyone. To all of you who have stayed on the line, there's actually quite a few of you still on the line. So thank you so, so much. Please, if this work speaks to you, I would love to have you in guided living. And if it's not guided living, hopefully we will continue in some capacity in the future. And I'm always so, so happy to hear from you. So thank you for making the time in your day today, or if you've ended up catching the replay. Thank you so, so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, and of course where your guidance is going to take you next. Bye.